This is Brother Ron, and welcome to We All Be News Radio and TV, the news-free Dixie for the 21st century.
Greetings, family. I want to send amplified blessings and condolences to the family of the late, great Charles Evers. We lost Charles Evers yesterday, Wednesday, July 22nd. He was one of my favorite iconoclastic personalities from the civil rights movement of all time. Actually, he is the big brother of the late, great Medgar Wiley Evers. And he definitely was his brother's keeper because he came back to Mississippi from Chicago back in 1963 to take his brother's place as the field secretary for the NAACP down in Mississippi. And in 1969, he became the first elected black mayor in Mississippi since Reconstruction. He became the mayor of Fayette, Mississippi back in 1969. But I want to tell y'all, Jim, he told me when I used to go down to Jackson, Mississippi to interview him impromptu, cold call, like at his radio station. To me, he was like the Godfather. He was sitting patiently in his office next to the door entrance. And like, you know, he was a cool brother, man. He won't be forgotten by me. But I want to share this tidbit because we're going to do some tributes to brother Charles Evers on the We All Be News platform. But I want to share this tidbit he shared with me. He used to talk about all the time that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who was a close friend of the family, when he used to come down to Mississippi, in particular Jackson, he would stay with Charles Evers. He told me that Dr. King told him one time when he stayed with him, he said, "Charles, I feel so safe and comfortable because you got all the guns and goons." Rest in peace, brother Charles Evers. We love you madly. Nice to know that the Ever brothers are back together again. Love and blessings.
Greetings, family. Welcome to another wonderful, infotaining, agitating edition of the Artivist ThANKHs. I am the thought provocateur, your friend, your brother, Brother Ron, bringing you some more info you can use because knowledge is the currency of the universe. And I think it's very important that we stay informed because what better way to act when you know that you're acting in your best interest. And today I want to talk about the legacy of the late, great James Charles Evers, also better known as actually Charles Evers, the older big brother of the late, great Medgar Wiley Evers, who just passed Wednesday, July 22nd, 2020, at the ripe old age of 97. Who heard of civil rights legends, alpha males, leadership living that long? You think about his brother Medgar was taken out at the age of 37. Malcolm and Martin was taken out of here at the age of 39. And this brother was able to live to 97, almost a century year young. Very interesting guy, one of my favorite people of all time, a true iconoclast. If you look up the definition of an iconoclast, it should be the picture of Charles Evers because he really was a true maverick. I know people go around calling certain people mavericks, but this guy was a real political maverick, and he lived his life to the fullest. And we're going to celebrate this brother on We All Be News platform because I'm very disappointed in the lack of interest in this amazing man's life story. His true story. It's better than a Hollywood movie. He's like a superhero. I mean, like with Baba Dick Gregory, you listen to these guys' stories, their life stories. It's hard to believe that these people actually existed because black folks' lives are not truly respected in this system. They said we were 3/5 human in the Constitution for all types of political exploitation purposes. When you had a situation where Dred Scott, who tried to get his freedom, was told by the Supreme Court Chief Justice Roger Taney in so many words that you have no rights that the white man is bound to respect you nor your descendants. So black folks never been truly respected for the contributions we have made to this country. Even our own people don't have an idea. So it's interesting. Yes, Charles Evers got the New York Times treatment. He got him on obituary in the New York Times, which says he's a person of note. But my problem is, from my understanding, I had read an article online saying that the NAACP, that's the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, have not, as I know, as of today, which is Monday, July 27, 2020, they have not issued any type of official statement acknowledging the passing of one of their own. Charles Evers took over, or Charles Evers, I'm sorry, I got to pronounce that S. Charles Evers took over for his brother back in 1963 as the field secretary for the National Advancement for the Association of Colored People in Mississippi. Now, he wasn't a fan favorite or an establishment favorite. Like I said, he was very much an iconoclast, if there ever was one. He had a very colorful life up to that point in terms of, people would say he was a bad boy. He was a gangster, basically. He was a bootlegger. He was a pimp. He ran numbers in Chicago as well as in Mississippi. This guy was a bad man, according to some people. So he was not a Jack and Jill Boulay type, So, like him and Medgar were two different people. They were on the same page when it came to black liberation, but Medgar and him were two different people. Medgar was a saint, and Charles Evers was most definitely a sinner. But that's why he probably lived to be 97 years old. He was nobody's martyr. He was not going to be nobody's martyr like his brother, the late, great Medgar Evers, who got killed at 37 in front of his family. And they said his last words when he was down in the hospital for a hole in his chest was, "Turn me loose." See, he couldn't breathe back in '63 either. But Charles was a different breed. But they came from an interesting household. So I was so disappointed when they did not acknowledge brother Charles, his passing. I believe they acknowledged John Lewis, rightfully so. They acknowledged the late great Reverend C.T. Vivian. Both of them died on the same day. C.T. Vivian and John Lewis on July 17, rightfully so. But they have not officially acknowledged the passing of Charles Evers as I do this recording as of Monday, July 27, 2020. It's really a shame, because the thing about it is the national president of the NAACP is Derrick Johnson, who was the longtime president of the Mississippi chapter. He was the longtime president of the NAACP Mississippi chapter, and he's a decent guy. I met him a couple of times, but but I don't know why. That's a very colorful chapter. You got both Evers brothers in that chapter who were field secretary, very decorated men, World War II veterans. Charles Evers, made political history as the first black elected mayor in Mississippi since post-Reconstruction, which is kind of misleading because he actually was not the first black mayor in Mississippi, because you had the all-black town of Mound Bayou in the Mississippi Delta, who have had black leadership, including mayors, since the 1890s at least. They were founded July 12, 1887, Mound Bayou, by Isaiah Montgomery, whose father, Benjamin Montgomery, was basically like an accountant for Joseph Davis, who was the older brother of Jefferson Davis. That's the president of the Confederacy, Jefferson Davis. So Isaiah Montgomery founded Mound Bayou back in July 12, 1887 with his cousin Benjamin Green. And they were incorporated as a city back in on February 23rd, 1898. So you had that, but then you got to think about, okay, Charles Evers was the first elected black mayor since Reconstruction after the passage of the 1965 Voting Rights Act. So 4 years later he becomes the mayor. And also the town he was a mayor in was not an all-black town. You had 25% white population, so you had 75% black, 25% white, which is interesting because, like, When he became mayor, when he was elected mayor, the white police resigned from the police force. But Charles is such a diplomatic person. He said we're still looking for white police officers who's really down to serve the people. So he's a equal opportunity employer. But yeah, the white people on the police force resigned after he became mayor in '69. And also, it's interesting to note that Earl Lucas also became mayor of Mound Bayou the same day that Charles Evers was elected. But like I said, this was a historical thing because he was elected in a place where black folks were denied the vote for most of the century. You understand? Because Mound Bayou was recognized as an all-black town. They always had the franchise. Isaiah Montgomery, interesting enough, was the only black person, I believe, to attend the infamous 1890 Mississippi Constitution Convention, where they basically disenfranchised the black vote for the majority of the state. But Isaiah Montgomery was there. I don't think he said a mumbling word. He was just there. You know what I'm saying? Probably still was invisible. But Frederick Douglass, who was the black leader of the time, was the black leader. Frederick Douglass was hypercritical of Isaiah Montgomery, and he said he was too accommodating, too compromising, and that it would not only cost the black folks in Mississippi, but black folks would pay for his lack of leadership as it concerned the franchise. Because Isaiah Montgomery was the type, he was from that Booker T. Washington school. Booker T. Washington was definitely a supporter of Mound Bayou. He helped give some financial investments, drive some financial investments into Mound Bayou. But it was more like, the compromise speech from 1895 would be as separate as the fingers, would be as one as a fist when it comes to mutual progress, but basically separate as the fingers when it comes to social things. So he was from that school, and it did cost black folks the franchise, not only in Mississippi for the most part, but also throughout the state. I mean, throughout the country, because the example is set. But yeah. So Earl Lucas was elected the same day, but what made Charles Evers so significant was the fact that he was elected in a town that was denied the franchise to black people with a considerable minority population of white people, and he got thank you letters and whatever. It was a national event or a national celebration. He got thank you letters from former President Lyndon B. Johnson, then current President Richard Nixon, from a lot of powerful political leaders throughout the country acknowledged this as a win. And you think about this too as well. Charles Evers was seated and recognized at the 1968 Democratic Convention in Chicago. That very turbulent convention where they was like beating up, busting people's heads, the police state, busting people's heads like hippies and Black Panthers. But they acknowledged him with a standing ovation as being part of the Mississippi delegation, the biracial loyal faction. The biracial loyal faction. Think about 4 years earlier at the Democratic Convention at Atlanta, where they didn't want to seat the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. I believe you had John Lewis a part of that, Fannie Lou Hamer. This is like the same summer, Freedom Summer, where the 3 civil rights workers were lynched by police and the Klan working hand in hand. But really the police was the Klan. But I'm just being nice about it. But think about that summer, 4 years in Atlantic City, 4 years earlier, where they didn't want to even let Fannie Lou Hamer have her day in terms of talking before the Credentials Committee. She was doing her testimony, and they kept on cutting in and out, I believe, on her. And I believe Lyndon B. Johnson did an impromptu press conference about nothing just to get attention away from Fannie Lou Hamer and the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. And they didn't want to acknowledge them, because you got to think about it. Like I said, Joe Biden mentors were the infamous Mississippi senators. Very powerful U.S. senators, James Eastland and John Stennis. These were Democrats. They were committed racists, and they abused their power when it came to disenfranchising black folks for decades. So this is the party that would not acknowledge the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, which was really a biracial coalition, and try to be a loyal faction to the Democrats. But 4 years later, they did acknowledge Charles Evers, who was standing ovation. After all, he did lose his brother, Medgar, 5 years earlier. And also, Charles Evers was a Democrat in the 50s, he worked for was he a Democrat? I mean, well, he worked for the registration to vote committee for Mississippi for the NAACP. I don't know. I don't want to say necessarily he was a Democrat back then. It's back in the 50s. They actually ran Charles Evers out the state of Mississippi back in the late 50s. He ended up selling it in Chicago. And let me start with this because I think it's important because like I don't see a lot of new black media like covering this man's amazing legacy. I had the pleasure and honor of interviewing Charles Evers several times. I actually met him in person several times back in 2009, but in 2008, I interviewed him via the phone. That was my first time talking with him directly. And we talked about him endorsing Barack Obama. Because what they don't mention in his obituary, that as a longtime Republican, he actually endorsed Barack Obama in 2008. He was, pro Barack Obama. He knew the significance of this black man becoming president, or so-called black man becoming president. Then 8 years later, of course, he went back to the party line, endorsed Trump, and a lot of controversy ain't that. But he was always his own man. He was an independent thinker. Really, he was a real independent that posed as a Republican, who was once a Democrat. Like I said, you go back to 68, not only was he acknowledged as a delegate of Mississippi, but also he was the co-chair before the convention for Bobby Kennedy's presidential campaign. He was the co-chair for the Mississippi committee for Bobby Kennedy's campaign. He was close to Bobby Kennedy to a certain degree. Bobby Kennedy, the white man from Massachusetts and New York, whatever, senator from New York, the brother's keeper of the flame of his brother, JFK. Kind of like I can see Bobby Kennedy and Charles Evers related on that level because they both were their brother's keepers. Like, Bobby tried to keep the legacy and the objective and agenda of his brother JFK alive. Charles trying to keep the legacy and the agenda of his brother Medgar Evers alive. So they can identify on that level. I can understand, I respect that. And also, you think about this, Bobby Kennedy, JFK father, Joe Kennedy, was an interesting and colorful character in his own right. He made the family fortune through bootlegging, through insider trading on Wall Street. It's interesting because Franklin Roosevelt not only made him ambassador to England, but also at one point made him the first chairman of the Security Exchange Commission. This is Joe Kennedy, the patriarch of the Kennedy clan. And people said, well, why you made him the chairman of the SEC? This guy is a crook. He was known for insider trading. He made a fortune off the stock market crash of 29. And FDR said it takes a crook to catch a crook. It takes a crook to catch a crook. And Joe Kennedy was a rotten, dirty scoundrel, as they say. So Charles Evers, had that background as a bootlegger, as a pimp, as a numbers runner. Had he been white, he probably could have made a fortune like the Kennedys did. So they had all that relatable stuff. But, and Charles Evers, interesting enough, was there the night that RFK was shot to death at the Ambassador Hotel. He was there. He actually did an interview with the press right before all that went down. So Charles Evers was there, and also Charles Evers was the cat that when Bobby Kennedy came to the Mississippi Delta and to Mississippi to tour, to see the poverty firsthand. Bobby Kennedy was going to these sharecropper tenant farms and, all this stuff, their homes. He go in the houses where the black kids didn't have on pants or shoes, didn't have no damn carpet or wood on the floor. They was on a dirt floor, and they called the house, and he was crying like a baby, according to Charles Evers. He was just crying. He was bawling because he didn't know this type of level of extreme poverty existed in America. Because think about it, he's a child of privilege. He basically was a part of America's, probably close enough to a royal family if there ever was one. The Kennedys, there was America's royal family. I mean, he came from prestige and resources, and to see this, in a place, Mississippi Delta, Mississippi is interesting because it's a place of extremes. Like Mississippi is a place of extreme wealth. Cotton is king, and extreme poverty. Some of the greatest people this country ever produced came out of Mississippi. You think about it. Now, really think about it, because Mississippi get this bum rap for being this very violent and racist place, which it is, but it's America too. Like Malcolm X said, anything south of Canada is the South. And he said America is Mississippi. So it's not just on Mississippi, it's just the nature of the country. But think about all the brilliant people in different human activities. I mean, they came out of Mississippi brilliant, black and white. You have arguably some of the greatest writers and playwrights. Tennessee Williams, arguably America's greatest playwright. Columbus, Mississippi. Richard Wright, one of the greatest novelists to ever live. You know, Native Son, Black Boy, whatever. Mentor, Ojegna to James Baldwin and so many others. He's from Mississippi. Jackson, Mississippi. You think about William Faulkner. Come on, William Faulkner. You know, he's up there with Hemingway and Fitzgerald. Those his peers. He's from Mississippi. And I remember reading somewhere where William Faulkner was going to debate Dr. Martin Luther King about race, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. about race, but it never happened. But, you know, William Faulkner, who was very conflicted about his Southern heritage, believe a lady named Eudora Wheatley. I believe she's an author. I hope I said her name right. I know y'all correct me because people love to correct a black man, even black folks. You got media giant Oprah Winfrey is from Mississippi. Some of the greatest athletes, probably arguably some of the greatest football players. Yeah, some of the greatest football players who ever lived, if not the GOAT. Walter Payton is from Mississippi. Jerry Rice is from Mississippi. Brett Favre is from Mississippi. The late, great Steve McNair, along with the late, great Walter Payton. Steve McNair is from Mississippi. Alcorn State. Walter Payton went to Jackson State. Jerry Rice went to, I think, Mississippi Valley State or Mississippi State Valley. Y'all know what I'm talking about. These are historical black colleges and universities. So some of the greatest football players, if not the greatest football players, came out of historical black colleges and universities down in Mississippi. So that should be duly noted. Also, you know, I said Brett Favre, right? Brett Favre, was he from Mississippi State University? Y'all can correct me, but as a white boy, but he was a hell of a quarterback, right? One of the all-time greats. That's football. I tell you about Oprah Winfrey, the writers. I'm not even naming all the writers that came out of Mississippi, right? Even Bob Johnson, the founder of Black Entertainment Television. That Bob Johnson, he's from Mississippi. I remember I read somewhere where Bob Johnson talking about he told his dream he want to own a black-owned network. He had this dream back in the 1960s, and people laughed at him. But he made it happen because BET came on the scene in 1980. And what's interesting about BET is that it was not a full-fledged network, right? It wasn't like, you know, when you like NBC or CBS or Viacom. BET basically started out as a 2-hour thing on the weekends back in the early 80s, showing reruns of old blaxploitation movies and stuff like that. So it went from 2 hours to being a fully formed network. Bob Johnson was able to become a billionaire off of that. So you had media moguls like Bob Johnson, Oprah Winfrey from Mississippi. Mississippi has more Grammy-winning and Grammy-nominated music artists than any place in the country, or artists who are connected to Mississippi. Nobody had more Grammy nominees and winners than the state of Mississippi. That's why they got a Grammy Museum down there. Delta State Community College down there in Cleveland, Mississippi. I think it's the only Grammy Museum outside of Los Angeles, or it's one of the few Grammy Museums. But they got it down there for a reason, because so many Grammy-nominated artists and winners came out of the state of Mississippi. You know, you think about, you know, Aretha Franklin's parents are both from Mississippi. Quincy Jones, his people from Vicksburg. The Jones brothers, I'm going to talk about that later on, in connection with Charles Evans in Chicago. The Jones brothers. Great jazz artists, Lester Young, Hank Jones, blues, come on, Muddy Waters, B.B. King, Howlin' Wolf, Robert Johnson. Mississippi is so rich in culture. It's just ridiculous, but people make fun of Mississippi all the time. But like I said, even titans of industry, Fred Smith, the founder of FedEx, is from Mississippi, was born in Mississippi. So I say all this to say Mississippi is an interesting place. Produced a lot of interesting people, black and white and all in between. So I try to give Mississippi props for props I do, and it is what it is. And my folks are from Mississippi. Even if you look at Clarksdale, oh yeah, y'all got me started now. Talk about music. Clarksdale is an interesting place. You know, Clarksdale is the home, was the birthplace and home of not only people like Sam Cooke. You know, he was raised in Chicago, but he was born in Clarksdale. You know what I'm saying? He was born by the river in the tenement. So he was born in Clarksdale in the projects. Then you have Ike Turner, one of the gods of rock and roll, one of the founders, the architects of rock and roll. He's from Clarksdale. You have Charles Wright. Express yourself. No, express yourself. Da, 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 da. You can do it. Express yourself. He's from Clarksdale. Clarksdale was also the place where Bessie Smith, the Empress of the Blues, she died at Riverside, what is now known as the Riverside Hotel in Clarksdale, Mississippi, back in 37. I think September 1937. So you have Nate Dogg, smoke weed every day. He's from Clarksdale. You have Rick Ross, the rapper, born in Clarksdale. Hell, flows like the mighty Mississippi River, right? Born out of Clarksdale. You have people that played at Motown out of Clarksdale. You have so many musicians. And that town maybe got 17,000 people, produce all that talent, athletes, everything. So, who is Charles Evers? Who did he come from? Who is his people? That's a question that people need to be asking. It's not always addressed, but he was born September 11, 1922 in Decatur, Mississippi. His dad was James Evers. His mama was Jessie Evers. James was a laborer. His mom was a maid. And I think they also owned and ran a funeral home, and according to some sources. But y'all should read Charles Evers' autobiography, Have No Fear. I'm in the process of reading it right now. It's a great read. Like I said, this man's life story is better than a Hollywood movie. Like he's a superhero or something. And black history is always better than science fiction. If you know the truth about our people, it's amazing, it's inspiring. But that's his home. He's the eldest of 4 children. It was him, Medgar, and 2 sisters. I believe one sister is still alive. I don't know if she's still alive now. I think that's the one in Chicago that took over his business when he went back home to become his brother's keeper, in terms of continuing his brother's legacy and work in Mississippi. And what's interesting, from my understanding, is that their father was known as a crazy black man, or like he's like one of them Richard Pryor comedy album titles. According to the white folks, he type of dude that did not get out the sidewalk for white people and look white folks in the eye and spoke his mind. That's who he was. That's their father, James. Down, 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 James. That's their father. You gotta think about back in those times, black folks had to get off the sidewalk for white people. You could not look a white person in the eye, could not talk back to a white person. A lot of times that would either get you killed or put in the crazy house. They would actually put a whole bunch of black folks in mental institutions for looking for looking white folks in the eye. That's reckless eyeballing. Or for speaking back to white people. Or refusing to get off the sidewalk. I don't care if you 80-year-old black man is a 2-year-old white kid on the sidewalk, you still got to get off the sidewalk. And if you 80 years old as a black man, they don't call you a man, they call you boy. They call you uncle or something like that. Even though you're not related to them, they'll call you uncle or boy and stuff like all types of disrespectful things, right? And this is why we got to do this, because we got to tell our stories. If we black people, if you a black person, you got elders in your family, especially folks from down south, survived the Jim Crow and the Great Depression, you need to record their testimonies, their stories before they pass. They got stuff to tell. We all got stories to tell, but we do ourselves a disservice when we don't tell the stories of our people, of our elders and our ancestors. We do all of us a disservice for not only our generation, but also for future generations coming up. So this is important to be a repository for these stories. So when people say, well, why black folks deserve this and that, I'm going to tell you why we deserve this. Because we caught hell while we gave y'all heaven. We caught hell while giving white folks heaven. That's why we deserve it. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to give you the examples. Because like I told people before, right now, John Tyler, who was the 10th president of the United States and a slave owner, as I record this to my knowledge, he still got 2 living grandsons. This was his 10th president of the United States. We on president number 45. You tell me that the 10th president of the United States who owned slaves still got 2 grandsons around in 2020? You just had a lady that's died, Irene Triplett. She was the last person to receive a pension from the Civil War. She died on May 31st, 2020. Her father, Most Triplett, fought on both sides of the conflict. At first, he was a Confederate. Then he joined the Union. So he still get a Union Army pension from her father's involvement in the Civil War. She just passed on May 31st, 2020. Irene Triplet. Look it up. Take a look. It's all online. So just try to put things in proper context. When people tell you that slavery was so long ago, it's not that long ago. You had slaves living up. They said the last slave, the person that went through chattel slavery, the last person that died in 1971. So this is not 100 years. This is not that long ago. This year marks the 105th anniversary of Booker T. Washington passing. He died in 1915. He was born into slavery. Ida B. Wells Barnett, who just won the Pulitzer posthumously, died in 1931. She was born into slavery. Harriet Tubman, who Kanye West went into about the controversy, whatever, she died in 1913. So this was not long ago to slavery. She was born into slavery on the Eastern Shore. So this was not long ago, people. It was very recent, excuse me. So the more you know, the more you grow. But yeah, Charles Evans, that's his father. And it's funny, I was thinking about it. If you put his parents' first names together, it'll say Jesse James. So, Charles Evans definitely had that outlaw mentality when it came to working this system. And he definitely was a shapeshifter and a reinventor. When I think about that, I think about my Jegna, Dick Gregory, who was a good friend with Charles Evans' brother Medgar. He loved Medgar, but Dick Gregory didn't really mess with Charles Evans. It is what it is. You can't be everybody's cup of tea. But yeah. So it's also interesting that when they were growing up, they had white playmates, and this is a misconception about the South by being so rigidly segregated. The South, in a lot of ways, was more integrated than the North was. Some of the most segregated places could be in places like New York City or Chicago. Very polarized. People were very separate. But Charles and Medgar had white playmates growing up. That's why it was so disheartening when they came back from the war. They both were World War II veterans. Medgar was in the Red Ball Express over in Europe, trying to make the world safe for democracy. Charles was stationed in the Philippines. But when they came back home to try to register to vote, they was turned away from the courthouse by armed white gunmen that they used to play with as kids growing up. So the same folks they came up with playing with were the same folks that denied them their rights. Although they were veterans, they fought for this country, and they were not treated with the same respect. And Charles talk about this, Medgar talks about this incident right after the war. Also, I remember when I was at Greyhound bus station in Memphis. About, I want to say, man, how long ago was that? It was like almost 20 years ago. I was at Greyhound bus station. I ain't gonna never forget this. His sister from Alabama sat next to me, and we started talking. And she talked about how her father had this prosperous grocery store down in Alabama. And he said, what's funny was that a lot of their patrons or their clients, the customers, were white. The white folks had a lot of respect for her father, who ran this grocery store. So they're like, wow, really? Yeah. Because you think about down south, everybody was so segregated, whites only, blacks only. But this dude's biggest customers were white people. And he was a black guy in Alabama, of all places. Come on now. So we got to understand that this thing is complex. It's like I talked about earlier about they saying Charles Evans was the first black mayor in Mississippi since Reconstruction. Now, you had Mount Bayou, but the thing about it is he's the first black mayor elected to a town that also had white people in it in Mississippi, right after the Voters' Rights Act of 65. So it's all about context and who tell these stories, but it doesn't discredit anybody either way when you acknowledge truth and contradictions. So like I said, they was in World War II. Charles actually fell in love with a Filipino, but he couldn't bring her back to Mississippi because they didn't acknowledge interracial marriage back then. Well, I think Filipinos are black to me, but that's another story. We can talk about that on another thing. But he couldn't bring her back home. That's why he didn't. And my grandfather, my mom's father, my maternal grandfather, he talks about this as well. He was a World War II veteran. He's from Mississippi. He was from Como, Mississippi, Coldwater, whatever. He been dead for almost 15 years this coming August 12th. But he told me a story about when he was over in France. He was part of the Red Ball Express, like Medgar Evers was. He was part of D-Day Normandy invasion. And what I mean by Red Ball Express is this group of truck drivers, primarily African American, who were giving the mission of delivering food and supplies to General Patton's Third Army. That's U.S. General George S. Patton, the celebrated military genius. When they invaded Normandy, they were supplying the food and all this stuff to his army that was rapidly advancing towards Berlin. They're trying to beat the Russians, I guess, to Berlin. So my grandfather was a part of those truck drivers. They should be just as celebrated as Tuskegee Airmen because they were very important to winning the war effort for the Allied forces. That's kind of like, you would compare them today like FedEx truck drivers or Amazon truck drivers, only for the military. So my grandfather told me a story when he was in France. He actually met a black expatriate who was from the States. He was from St. Louis, this black expatriate. He stayed over from World War One. He was a World War One veteran. This is like doing World War Two. So he had a World War One veteran that been over in Europe, in particular France, basically 20-something years. And he met him at like one of these pastry shops or coffee shops. And the veteran, the World War One veteran, asked my grandfather, because he was with his family. He had a mixed family, of course. He married a French woman, had kids by this French woman. He asked my grandfather, "Where you from?" My grandfather told him, "I'm from Boston." He country boy. He from Mississippi. He told him he's from Boston. I don't believe the dude brought it. But he was trying to convince my grandfather, "Why don't you stay over here after the war, man? Don't even go back there. Don't even worry about going back. Just stay over here." But my grandfather's heart was America, man. He's a country boy from Mississippi. He want to go back home to his family. Albeit, the way they treated black folks was insane. Because I know my grandfather, he said what hurt him was when he came back, he was on the train, and one of the first people to call him a boy was an 80-year-old black man. Here he was in his full uniform, had basically risked his life, and he had some severe injuries. I mean, he had a lot of complications that stayed with him for the rest of his life. Here is one of the first people they called him boy is an 80-year-old black man on the train. And that really hurt him. It made him angry, hurted him, frustrated him. But, that's another story for another day. I just want to paint a picture of what they had to go through as veterans coming back home, especially, the Evers brothers from Mississippi going back home. Charles Evers ended up going back to school. I think he had completed his high school education after the war, and then he ended up going to Alcorn State University along with his brother and got his college degree. So they both were college educated guys. They were World War One veterans. World War II, veterans, and college educated. And they both went into activism in their own way. They both got involved with the NAACP in the 50s and did the thing their own way. Like Medgar was very bookish, like a nerd, but he was fearless. He liked women that were shy and into books. Like he ain't like all them, he liked conservative women. His brother Charles was very loud, ambitious, braggadocious probably. He liked, women were a little bit sassy. Maybe a Meg the Stallion. I'm a savage or something like that. I don't know. He's like, they were different types, man. Medgar was the martyr. Charles was the sinner. And they both was on the same page. They both loved each other. You know what I'm saying? He loved his brother, Charles did. Medgar loved his big brother, right? But they just did their thing in a different way. But they both wanted to franchise. They wanted to get black folks to franchise, right? So what's interesting, Medgar moved up to Mound Bayou that I talked about earlier and started working for Dr. T.I.M. Howard. That's Theodore Roosevelt Mason Howard. He's not even talked about today. Dr. Howard was one of the greatest civil rights leaders of his era. And also he was known as, if not the wealthiest, but one of the wealthiest black men in the state of Mississippi. He was a surgeon. He worked at the hospital in Mound Bayou. I want to call it the Tabor Hospital in Mound Bayou. Chief surgeon. This man owned construction businesses. Medgar worked for his insurance company, Magnolia Mutual Life Insurance. He was an insurance agent for Dr. Howard at that company. Dr. Howard built the first black swimming pool for black folks in Mississippi. Had his own zoo. Had restaurants. Man was an entrepreneur, a philanthropist, and an activist. very much vocal. And this guy was like, he'll go on big game hunting in Africa, go on safari. So, he didn't think of himself as no lowly black person. This guy spoke his mind, looked white folks in the eye, and told them what time it was. Wow, no problem in his tone. That's who Medgar worked for. And Medgar was inspired by Dr. T.M. Howard. Dr. T.M. Howard also helped organize the Regional Council for Negro Leadership, very progressive organization at the time. Because a lot of times when we think about the civil rights movement, we thinking about in the 60s when, black and white working together, marching. Some of the best moments of the civil rights movement came when black folks just worked for themselves, worked among themselves, owned their businesses, invest in each other. This is when we was our strongest. And it's sad to say that a lot of that came in the early parts of the struggle. And in the 1960s, we got confused. And then we were trying to get back on track, and that's when they started taking everybody out. You understand what I'm saying? If you look at Dr. King's speech from 1968, the last speech he done in Memphis, he was talking about investing in black businesses, insurance companies, credit unions, banks, stuff like that. Don't buy from where you can't be hired at. Boycott, Wonder Bread, Coca-Cola, Hearts Bread, all these different places. But black folks were doing that back in the day. You hit the Regional Council of Negro Leadership, telling folks to boycott gas stations where you can't use the restroom. Why are we going to gas stations where we can't use the restroom? Because back in the day, black folks, it was crazy what we put up with. You got the Green Book. Now I ain't talking about the movie, the exploitative movie that really just undermined the meaning of what the Green Book was. But the Green Book was a book made by a black U.S. postal man from New York City. Give you a book. It was a book that gave you places where black folks can go to eat, to sleep, hotels and whatnot, to get entertainment, to get a haircut around the country. Because it was dangerous being a black motorist. I know it's dangerous to a lot of people now because of police brutality, but I'm talking about it was just dangerous overall as being a black motorist traveling the country, stopping in places that might be sundown towns. Where you black, you better not be out on the streets after a certain time or be in the town after a certain time. So it was very dangerous being a black person, just being a motorist, minding your own business. So this Green Book was very important, helping point black folks where they can go to shop in peace, can eat in peace, can rest in peace, and get gas. So you had the Regional Council of Negro Leadership saying boycott where you can't get, boycott the gas stations. They won't let you use the restrooms. Even my mom talked about how they used to travel, especially in Mississippi, how they couldn't go to the restrooms for fear, because blacks only, whites only, just be fearful. So they would actually use the restroom on the side of the road. This is women, men, and children. So, this is less than 60 years ago that black folks had to do this. So, it's interesting to talk about. So the Regional Council of Negro Leadership will have annual events. Like they have a meeting in Mount Bayou. Sometimes be up to like 10,000 black folks from around the Delta, even around the country will come to these meetings. And they have guest speakers like Thurgood Marshall and the representative Adam Clayton Powell Jr. They have entertainment like Mahalia Jackson come out, and they'll try to get black folks encouraged. Like we gotta not only register to vote, but also own our black businesses. Start investing in black businesses. I hope I'm saying it right. I know I just get tongue tied sometimes, but I hope y'all understand what I'm saying. So this was going on for years, and Dr. Howard not only was a Jegna rather to Medgar Evers, but also Fannie Lou Hamer was inspired by Dr. T.M. Howard, and Brother Charles Evers was inspired by Dr. Howard. He had a lot of great respect for Dr. Howard. I know I talked to him about Dr. Howard in one of our interviews. A lot of respect for that man. But Dr. Howard is not remembered today. This guy was also one of the first national leaders to raise money for the widow of Malcolm X. When Malcolm X got killed on February 21st, 65, Dr. Howard in Chicago was raising money for the family of Malcolm X. Dr. Howard also gave Jesse Jackson Sr. the seed money to start a Rainbow Push Coalition. That actually was started in Dr. Howard's mansion in Chicago. So Dr. Howard was a Jegna to Jesse Jackson. Jesse Jackson don't talk about Dr. Howard today, but Dr. Howard took care of Jesse in his early days. Jesse was just 26 when Dr. King was killed in Memphis. So let's put that in perspective. But Dr. Howard invested in him like he invested in Medgar Evers, excuse me, so many other leaders. So he's been forgotten about, And I think one of the reasons why Dr. Howard is forgotten about because he was known for giving illegal abortions. Like, back in the day when he was in Mississippi, the man was powerful. One of the reasons why he was so powerful because a lot of white privileged families would go to him for abortions. Not just poor black people, but he'll give abortions for white folks. He was helping solve white folks' problems, and he knew where all the skeletons were buried. That's according to one source I read, what I'm saying, about Dr. Howard. And y'all should check out a book by Dr. Howard. I would say at this point, it got to be the definitive biography because there's nobody else writing about Dr. Howard these days. And it's by the Betos. Dr. Linda and Dr. David Beto wrote a joint book about Dr. Howard. It was called The Black Maverick. It's called something else, but you can find it on Amazon. And it's the Betos, the Beito. And I interviewed Dr. Linda about Dr. Howard not too long ago. I'm going to put out the full interview soon when I get some time. But, yeah, he mentored all them people. And also Dr. Howard was key in doing an independent investigation into what happened to Emmett Till. He was a pioneer in getting the information out about what happened to Emmett Till. I know people now know that there was more than just the two brothers involved in the lynching of Emmett Till. But really, they knew that in the 50s because of Dr. Howard and Medgar Evers, them working. Medgar Evers going in disguise as a sharecropper, interviewing black folks about what they know about what happened to Emmett Till. They was able to save witnesses' lives, move them out of Mississippi, including Mose Wright, the great uncle Emmett Till. The house, that Emmett Till was kidnapped from was Mose Wright's house. And people give him a lot of, I know people think he was a coward, but he was trying to negotiate the life of his great uncle, his great nephew. Just couldn't do it, And what messed it up is that the alleged incident involving Carolyn Bryant happened 3 days before they got Emmett Till. So the uncle was not aware though. Had the cousins and Emmett told him what happened at the store, you best believe that Emmett would have been on his way to Memphis that day with no problems going back to Chicago. So the uncle was not aware of what happened, of the alleged incident, but it spread like wildfire in the community because the black folks started gossiping among themselves. And I think Roy Bryant was told some type of way. I think black folks told Roy Bryant, if I'm not mistaken, because I don't think his wife was going to tell him anything at first. According to her, if you listen to her later testimony from Dr. Timothy Tyson, or Tim Tyson, the historian at Duke University, who said he allegedly interviewed Carolyn Bryant, and she admitted that nothing happened like that, and that Emmett did not deserve to die. And from my understanding, she was there the night they kidnapped Emmett. You know what I'm saying? Because witnesses, including Mose Wright, I believe, they heard a female voice saying that's him. So she's an accessory to the crime, and she should be in jail. Y'all put Bill Cosby in jail. Why not put Carolyn Bryant in jail? Because she actually did something. She helped kill a 14-year-old boy. But that's another story. But I'm just getting all deep into the rabbit hole here. We're talking about Charles Evers, right? We're talking about Charles Evers. So, yeah. Charles Evers, his brother went to the Delta, worked for Dr. Howard. He became the NAACP field secretary. Charles went down further south Mississippi, down to Philadelphia, Mississippi. And he was doing, I guess, he was on a registration committee for the NAACP in Mississippi. And he was a disc jockey. And he ran a cab station. He was doing bootlegging, number running, prostitution, all that stuff. I think he might have owned a hotel or something like that. It's interesting. I had some great uncles out of Kansas City, my paternal grandmother brothers. They weren't called pimps. They were called hotel owners. How about that? They own hotels. They happen to have prostitution. That's how it works. It's like Robert Church Sr., the first black millionaire of the South, allegedly. He made his money through real estate and pimping. But he didn't call it pimping. He called it real estate. He owned property that also doubled as houses of prostitution. But yet he was a philanthropist. He saved Memphis. He invested in black folks like Ida B. Wells. So he was able to clean his money by doing good works. See how it works? So Charles Evers, he was into that life. And, you got to think about Philadelphia, Mississippi, the same place several years later where them 3 civil rights workers, Swerner, Cheney, and Goodman, would be killed or lynched. So this guy was doing some slick stuff back in the 50s down there. He had no fear. So they eventually ran him out the state. And he went to Chicago, where he continued as a bootlegger, number runner, pimp. He also owned some clubs. I had a chance to talk to Charles Evers myself. We have several interviews with Charles Evers on We All Be. Y'all can check them out. It add up to like maybe several hours worth of interviews. So, but Charles talked about when he was in Chicago, he owned 2 nightclubs and some other real estate. And he was talking about his run-ins with the mob. Now, this is not just the mob. This is the Al Capone gang. This is the outfit. Yeah, the outfit. Started by Al Capone. That Al Capone. Once ran by Frank Nitti. That Frank Nitti. At that time period, back in the 50s, were ran by Tony Accardo and that cat named Sam Giancana, known as Momo. So these guys mean business, right? And Chicago outfit, is interesting because at one point Al Capone didn't mess with the rackets, the black rackets, that much. He didn't mess with numbers. They thought it was like a penny game, a penny show, or whatever. There was this bunch of pennies. It was nickels and pennies. It mean nothing. What happened was the reason why they got to the numbers, the mob in Chicago, was that Sam Giancana was in prison with this guy named Eddie Jones, this light-skinned dude named Eddie Jones, one of the Jones brothers. They were like some of the biggest policy kings in Chicago. See, numbers back then was called policy. Policy, the numbers was like the ghetto lottery. This is before the state lotteries took over the ghetto lotteries, the policy numbers and stuff like that, policy, all that stuff. But they ran some of the biggest policy wheels in Chicago, the Jones brothers. Originally from Vicksburg, their father was a minister. I think he died. Their mama got a lot of insurance money, I believe, from his death. She let her sons have the money to start their own cab service, their jitney, that made their fortune via their way. The start of their fortune came through them starting a cab company, a jitney. What they call a jitney, a black-owned cab company. Then they invested money to numbers, and the rest is history. They became multimillionaires. The Jones brothers. They all were college educated. I believe they was educated in Howard University. They all married fine women. I believe these women used to be dancers at the Cotton Club, if I'm not mistaken. They own homes in Mexico and in France. A villa in France and Mexico too. These guys was living like white people. So Eddie Jones, who was the older brother, went to jail for the family. He took the rap for income tax evasion. So he landed in jail back in the 40s, and he became friendly with Sam Giancana. This is the ruthless Sam Giancana. The Sam Giancana, they had the same mistress as JFK, Judith Campbell, who also helped get the Kennedy into office back in 1960 by rigging the election in Chicago and the state of Illinois. That's Sam Giancana, who was allegedly hired by the CIA to assassinate Fidel Castro. That's Sam Giancana. Yeah, that's Sam Giancana. Who was good friends with Frank Sinatra. Yeah, that's Sam Giancana. Befriended Eddie Jones. Eddie Jones thought he had a friend, which is interesting, I guess, because he was white or whatever. He trusted Sam Giancana, told him about the policy game and how all that money made, all those pennies and nickels add up to a fortune. And Sam Giancana just got, wow, really? And so when they got out of prison, Eddie Jones invited Sam Giancana to his home. And Sam Giancana could not believe that a black man was living like a white man. Like, I'm talking about an elite white man. He had plush carpet. He had all types of fancy artwork, all types of jewelry. And Sam Giancana, I can't believe, ain't no, N-word should live like this. Because Sam Giancana was a racist. He didn't believe a black man should have nothing. So what happened? Sam Giancana kidnaps Eddie Jones, holding him for ransom. Family paid the ransom. Family told, you got to leave Chicago. If you don't leave Chicago, all y'all end up in body bags or in the river. Or in the Lake Michigan, excuse me. They end up in Lake Michigan. So they all left Chicago, the Jones brothers. And what's significant is that Quincy Jones is from Chicago, right? His last name is Jones. Those his people. His daddy used to work for the Jones brothers. Those his people. When Quincy talking about his gangster relatives, he talking about the Jones brothers from Vicksburg, Mississippi. Another Mississippi connection, right? Quincy Jones, Mississippi, Vicksburg. See how it works? So, this little story. But then was a brother named Ted Rowe from Louisiana by way of Arkansas. Ted Rowe was mixed, but he identified as black. If you look at him, he's like a white man. But he had a little bit of Italian in him. He couldn't stand those Italians. He went to war with the outfit with Sam Giancana and them for several years. Uh, Black folks saw him as the Robin Hood of Bronzeville. Look up Teddy Rowe, Theodore Rowe, R-O-E, Theodore Rowe or Teddy Rowe. He took on them, man. And Sam Giancana and them, they couldn't stand him, but they respected him because he fought back. They said this guy will not lay down. Because a lot of the other policy kings, like the Jones brothers, they got out of town. Some of them just gave up their policy wheels. A lot of them were killed as well too. Some of them did fight back, but he was the last holdout, Teddy Rowe. So a lot of black folks did their policy dealings with him. They bet their numbers with Teddy Rowe out of respect because he was a race man. And what happened to Teddy Rowe was that one night he was pulled over by this guy named Fat Lenny Cafano. Fat Lenny Cafano was Sam Giancana's best friend. Fat Lenny Cafano's brother was Marshall Cafano. He ran Vegas for the Chicago mob. He was a big-time mob boss in Las Vegas. He ran Las Vegas for the Chicago mob. This is Marshall Cafano. He lived a long time. He almost died at 100 years old. So Teddy Rowe was pulled over by Fat Lenny. He had bodyguards. I believe they were like moonlighting. These were Chicago police officers moonlighting as bodyguards for Teddy Rowe. He got pulled over by Fat Lenny. Something happened. Fat Lenny gets killed either by Teddy Rowe or by one of his bodyguards. And so it really pissed off the outfit. So by August 4th, 1952, he was leaving his home, Teddy Rowe. He was ambushed by gunfire, and that's that. You know, he had a big funeral. Thousands of people came out. And really, I think what happened was him, from my understanding, he found out he had terminal cancer. And he was just tired of fighting. He said, look, I'm going to die anyway. I might as well die like a man, die like a G. And he died like a G. And that was August 4th, 1952. So several years later, you got Charles Evans in Chicago. Charles Evans running 2 nightclubs. I think on the south and west side of Chicago. Got real estate. Found out that the mob, the Chicago outfit, Sam Giancana's people, were trying to put jukeboxes in his clubs and not pay him. They all trying to, you know, what they were doing back then, they were putting in jukeboxes and vending machines in places and making folks offers they couldn't refuse. And Charles Evans wasn't going for it. Charles Evans was not going for it. So he had one of his goons put like syrup inside the jukeboxes to make them malfunction. So it kept on doing it. And so he ended up having to sit down with the mob. This is Charles Evans. And the mob respected him. They respected his clubs and all that stuff. They left him alone. Because he fought back. And I remember talking to Charles Evans. He told me that, you know, I believe in the 3 G's. God, guns, and goons. Like I said earlier about, you know, Dr. King used to come to Jackson. He used to stay with Charles Evans. And he said, well, Charles, I feel so safe and comfortable. Because you got all the guns and goons. So, think about it. Dr. King was very comfortable with black men with guns. When he led the March Against Fear after James Meredith got shot on Highway 51, I think it was 51. Was it 51? Or 61? I think it was 51. When he got shot, Dr. King and them continued the March Against Fear. You had the Deacons for Defense from Bogalusa, Louisiana, come up there and be his bodyguards. See, when Dr. King was coming to Memphis, he had an all-black police security detail. Except the last time he came from Memphis, or came to Memphis, he had no protection. See, Dr. King always had armed black men around him. He was always okay with that. When he went to Jackson, he would stay with Charles because he was safe around him because Charles had all that. Even getting back to Dr. T.I.M. Howard, when the Emmett Till thing, the trial went down for the killers, Mammy Till stayed with Dr. Howard. Charles Diggs, the congressman from Michigan, stayed with him. A lot of black folks stayed with Dr. Howard because he believed in armed self-defense. Dr. Howard had a nice ranch-style home out in Mound Bayou that still exists to this day with a lot of acres. Had a whole bunch of armed bodyguards around him during that time. Armed security would escort Mammy Till to and from the trial. You understand what I'm saying? Brother believed being strapped. So Charles Evans had goons around him too. In Chicago, he had them goons. Came back home, Mississippi, he had bodyguards, armed bodyguards. And what's said, what I said about the NAACP earlier, not acknowledging Charles Evans, they should acknowledge him because they helped get his brother killed. I'm going to tell you why. Medgar Evers knew that he was fated to die young, but he wanted to invent that if he could. He pleaded with the national officers of the NAACP to give him armed security or some type of bodyguard protection. They never did it. He asked them, can y'all please provide protection for me? They threatened me and my family. They didn't do it. And then I believe they issued an apology years later to Marilyn Evers. You know, and ironically, she saved the NAACP when she became president in the late 90s. She saved them from not existing. So here you are, the widow of this icon, the organization that betrayed your man, now asks you to save the organization from itself, which is interesting. So, you know, y'all can look all this up. But yeah, but Medgar wanted armed security, bodyguard, he didn't get it. But Charles believed in God, guns, and goons. So he had his guns and goons on fleek, on point. So that was Charles Evers, because he wasn't trying to be nobody's martyr. He's a businessman. He's not a martyr, man. Now, bless the ancestor Medgar for taking that for the team. Because Medgar also believed in armed self-defense. Him and Charles had a lot of respect for Jomo Kenyatta, leader of the Mau Mau. The Mau Mau uprising over in Kenya. They wanted a Mau Mau in Mississippi. They was ready to lead a armed overthrow of the state if necessary. These guys was not no cream puffs, man. Like, this is this misconception about the civil rights movement that everybody believed in the philosophy of nonviolence. That's not true. Of nonviolence, that's not true. Even stories of, I talked to ancestors now, like sisters like Margaret Block, whose brother was Sam Block. He was a legendary field secretary for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee in northern Mississippi. They talking about getting into fights and shootouts with the Klan and the sheriffs and stuff like that. Molotov cocktails. Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Ture was down there. They were getting in shootouts with the Klan, throwing Molotov cocktails and everything. So that's a story that needs to be told that's been suppressed. So you got this misconception by a lot of people in the movement. They were soft. That they were just like, y'all call Uncle Tom. Now we know Uncle Tom is not a bad thing to be. But I call Uncle Stephen. I think a lot of you guys were Uncle Stevens, including like Charles Evers. His legacy is very complex. And I'm trying to do my best to break it down. But Charles came back home mad when they did his brother in. Charles came on a Delta airline flight. This is after he got through with the mob. He did the sit down, the truce with the mob in Chicago. He come back home ready to kill white people. Whoever was involved in his brother's death, whoever got in his way. Like one of those Charles Bronson Death Wish movies or something. He came on a plane with a shotgun and 238s. It's on a Delta airline flight. Think about how we can't come on a plane with shampoo or a bottle with certain ounces of whatever liquid. It might be water that make you throw it out, right? But this guy was able to come on a Delta airline flight back in 1963 with shotguns and 238s. So he got down to Jackson, expected to get revenge on the state to take his brother's place as the field secretary of the NAACP for Mississippi. And he carried his brother's water. He did his thing his own way. And like I said, in 1969, he became mayor of Fayette, Mississippi. And he also ran for governor and senator. And I believe Congress at one point. Charles is interesting because, like I said, Mississippi should have been had several black governors and U.S. senators. But because of that Constitution thing in 1890, they disenfranchised the black vote. Now you guys also look at the fact of state-sponsored white terrorism that drove black folks out of the state of Mississippi, that killed a lot of black folks out in the state of Mississippi, and drove black folks away. So state-sponsored terrorism that was sponsored by not only the White Citizen Council and the Mississippi State Sovereignty Commission, this is basically the Mississippi government, but also by their powerful U.S. senators, John Stennis, James Eastland, as well as U.S. Congressman Jamie Whitten. Jamie Whitten is relatives with the folks that defended the Emmett Till killers. Those his people. And Eastland and Stennis helped expose, or they tried to discredit the character of Emmett Till by leaking classified military info on the execution of his father, Louis Till, which is very questionable to this day if he ever got a fair trial. So they tainted the public perception and the jury's perception or potential juror perception of Emmett Till. Saying, well, maybe the fruit doesn't fall too far from the tree, right? So I mean, it's all this stuff that comes into play. That's why it's important that we as black media tell these stories from our perspective. It's important that people know these stories, and not only that, it's important that once I tell you these stories, that you do your research, because there's so many conflicts and contradictions in a lot of things, and there's a truth in there somewhere. So you should be very vigilant of that. But Charles Evers ran for governor at one point, got 20-something% of the vote. He ran for senator at one point in 1978 when James Eastland retired. Now the guy, when James Eastland retired, you had Thad Cochran, who ran for senator for the Republican side. Then you had this other guy that was Eastland's favorite. He was a Democrat. He was running for the Democratic side of the Senate race. And then you had Charles as an independent. Charles got 23% of the vote. Thad Cochran won with 45% of the vote. I think he was the first Republican senator for the state of Mississippi in a long, long time. I said the Dixiecrats ran everything. So really, Charles Evers won the race for Thad Cochran. Had Charles Evers not been in the race, it's quite possible that the Democratic nominee, Eastland's favorite and appointed, wanted to be a successor, would have won that race with over 50% of the vote. But Charles Evers took a chunk of that. And what's interesting, towards the end, when they did a recall on Thad Cochran, he had to go and beg Charles Evers to give him support from the black community. Even though they didn't do anything for black folks for like 40-something years, he still had to get the blessing of a Charles Evers to get the black folks even thinking about him retaining his seat. And Thad Cochran died last year. I think he had cancer or something, renal failure or something he died from. But he died last year. But at least he resigned from his office, I believe, in 2018 because of health reasons. But that's the power of Charles Evers. He played that game. I believe the person he ran against for governor was involved in the Byron De La Beckwith case. That's a guy who allegedly killed Medgar Evers, his brother, who ended up dying in prison. They found him guilty in the 90s. Did that movie Ghosts of Mississippi about that trial and about the journey to get justice for Medgar. So he died in 2001, Byron De La Beckwith. But I believe he had something to do with Byron De La Beckwith getting off, the guy who ended up becoming governor of Mississippi that Charles Evers ran against. And what I love about Charles Evers is that he owned his past. He didn't run away from what made him who he was. He acknowledged the sores and the warts and all that stuff that go along with being who he was. He was very authentic in that way, very colorful guy, very helpful guy. People that I seen on social media, they talk this stuff about people they don't know. I tell you myself, I met the man many times. Not many, but several times. And a lot of times I just, be in Jackson. When I go to Jackson, Mississippi, a lot of times 2 places I got to stop at in Jackson will be Whataburger and WPMR 90.1 radio station in Jackson, where Charles Evers be holding court like he's a godfather of Jackson, right? And you go into his office, and it's amazing. He got all these pictures and stuff of his brother. So even all this time, he's thinking about his brother. His brother probably in his thoughts was in his thoughts daily, because Medgar, you could feel his spirit all around. Cause all these pictures and photos with Medgar. Now, so you have these pictures with celebrities. Charles is an interesting guy. He ran with the kings and the princes, and Muhammad Ali and Kennedys and Reagan. He endorsed Reagan in 1980. And then Reagan, spoke at the Neshoba County Fair. Neshoba County is where Sworn, Cheney, and Goodman were lynched. So, he spoke down there in 1980, and Charles Evers, who, endorsed Reagan. He's hard to read politically for a lot of people. He's a real maverick. He don't care what party you in. And his thing is like, are you going to bring jobs for my people? It's all about, can you do things economically to help black people? He didn't care who that person was, what their party affiliation was. That would make him unique. But getting back to the radio station, you just go in there and say, hey, Mr. Evers, how you doing? I'm Brother Ron from Memphis. I don't know if he ever remembered me or not. We gave him a We All Be Lifetime Achievement Award in 2015. And just ask him questions like, what do you think about Donald Trump? Because I told you, The first interview I did, he endorsed Barack Obama. It's back in 2008. He was for Barack Obama. You know, then 8 years later, he endorsed Trump. He said, I love Donald Trump and I love white women. He's going to be president. And he was president. And he met Donald Trump when that Civil Rights Museum opened in Mississippi and Jackson back in 2017. A lot of the black leadership, which is strange, was boycotting. I mean, you the mayor of Jackson, Chokwe Lumumba song, he wouldn't meet with Donald Trump. And John Lewis, yeah, the conscience of the Congress, wouldn't meet with Donald Trump. I just thought that was weird. He's elected official, you're elected official. It's not about your personal feelings, it's about the respect of office. On either side, you know, just do the duties of your office. It's just weird. I don't know, man. This is me. I'm just a different type of dude. But Charles Evers met Donald Trump at the airport. And you could tell that Donald Trump was very impressed with Charles Evers. And he, you know, regardless of Donald Trump, his policies and his personal thoughts about black people, anybody with some type of decency can respect the legacy of Medgar Wiley Evers. You know, you could tell like he was like a kid, you know, when he spoke the name Medgar Evers. A lot of respect, man. You just gotta respect a brother like that. There ain't no way about it. I don't care what your party. Somebody died for what they believe in, how he died, and what he stood for. Man was fearless. His brother was fearless too, but he wasn't gonna be nobody martyr. That's the difference. He had them armed goons around him at all times. He had that thing on. He had that goddamn it on him. Like goddamn it. He had that on him too. Like I said, he believed in God, goons, and guns. That's Charles Evers. So and he did it his way. So yeah, I mean, it's so much to talk about. The unfold, but also being his brother's keeper, Charles started the Medgar Evers Homecoming Festival back in the '70s with B.B. King. You know, B.B. King would come there faithfully every year to do that festival. I believe it would be the first weekend in June. The Medgar Evers Homecoming Festival, basically like a blues and R&B, you know, music thing. And they do a couple of events for 3 days honoring the legacy of Medgar Evers, but also entertaining the people. Even Dan Aykroyd, yes, that Dan Aykroyd, you know, comedian, Saturday Night Live, Ghostbusters, Dan Aykroyd, that one, he will come down there and do his thing at the Medgar Evers Homecoming Festival. So he was friends with Charles Evers. So the thing about it is, Charles Evers, it's hard to put him in a box. He's like what Duke Ellington said. Like what Duke Ellington said, he's beyond category. It's hard to put him in one box. You can't say he's this or that. He does a lot of different things. Also, you know, you look at some of these obituaries and some of the things, they will say that, you know, Charles Evers only had 4 daughters. He actually had 9 daughters and 2 sons. He told me this himself. He had 9 daughters and 2 sons, and probably had more kids than that. You know, he loved women. Maybe they don't want to talk about Charles. He had a love for women. He was an alpha male who loved women, and not just black women. He said he liked the white women. You know, yeah, and that was controversial. I love Donald Trump and white women. You know, and probably fried chicken too and watermelon. Okay. That's him, and he was unapologetically him. He didn't apologize to anybody for being himself, and that's something that we all should learn. And also another thing, like I said, with Charles Evers versus what people put out on social media, I don't know nothing. I don't argue with people on social media. I might acknowledge you a couple of times, and that's it. I got to move on. I got too much stuff to do. I got stuff I got to deal with myself. But people that knew him, that interacted with him, they had good things to say about him. I remember when I went down to Selma 50 in 2015. I went down to Selma, Alabama. I was standing in front of Brown AME Church, I believe. That's a church where Malcolm X spoke before he died, and you know, they did a lot of movement organizing in Selma at that church. They got like a marker, a statue and a marker with Dr. King outside the church. So I was standing outside this elderly gentleman, this white man. I think he was in his close to his 90s. He was 89 at the time, I believe. His name was Jim Steen. Former Marine, World War II veteran, was at Iwo Jima. Yeah, that Iwo Jima. He was there, but he was trying to find out, did anybody know that Charles Evers was around? He was, where's Charles Evers? And Charles was there, actually. I found out later that year that he was there. But he was asking anybody, have they seen Charles Evers? So I started talking to him, and he started telling me a story about how Charles Evers saved him and his son's life. His son was there as well, too. I think his son lived in Wilmington, Delaware, and the father stayed in Columbus, Georgia at that time. But they were talking about when they came to Selma, how Charles Evans saved their life. Basically he escorted them from the airport all the way to Brown and to Selma to make sure they was okay. But he basically was talking about how he was so fearless. And I got this on tape on We All Be TV, and he just wanted to thank him so many years later for saving their lives. So this is coming from a white man, former Marine, Iwo Jima survivor, saying that this black man saved his life and wanted to thank him years later in person for doing so. Him and his son. So I showed Charles Evans the footage, and basically what he said was, man, when you do the right thing, you shouldn't be looking for getting credit for it. I'm not interested in getting credit for doing the right thing. I'm all about helping people. So this is what he told me.
Another thing that made Brother Charles Evans such a powerful leader, a great black leader, that he understood the importance of controlling one's message. Brother Malcolm X once said that the media is the most powerful entity on the planet because it influences and controls the minds of the masses. And Charles Evans understood the value of telling your story on your own terms, with no apologies. For example, he was a radio disc jockey in Philadelphia, Mississippi back in the 50s. And also towards the end of his life, he owned a radio station, WMPR 90.1 FM in Jackson. I'm going to say he owned it because looking at obituaries, they said he owned the radio station. And I looked at another uh, site that said it was owned by this group. But let's just go with this narrative that he owned and controlled his radio station. But he definitely was there almost every day. He had his own talk show that I think appeared weekly, I believe on Wednesdays, if I'm not mistaken, called Let's Talk with Charles Evers. He understood the value of providing a platform for the community to express themselves, as well as a platform to get out his ideas and philosophies. You look at all our great leaders, all our great black leaders understood that importance of telling your story, of controlling the narrative. You go back to the day the Freedom Journal back in the 1820s. You go with Frederick Douglass, the North Star. Look at David Walker's The Appeal to the Colored Citizens of the World. You look at Ida B. Wells Barnett, The Free Speech and Headlight. You look at Marcus Garvey, The Negro World newspaper. Look at Dr. W.E. Du Bois, The Crisis magazine of the NAACP. You even look at Brother Malcolm X with Muhammad Speaks that he started for Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam. Minister Farrakhan, of course, with his final call. And it goes on and on. But all our great ones understood the power of using the media platform to control our message. The Black Panther Party had their paper. So we got to understand, if you are a black leader, you got to be in the media game because, it is so important to get stuff out there. And Charles Evans definitely was in that pantheon. Like I said, do your homework, research for yourself, take a look. It's all online. Read his book, Have No Fear, and I will hope the NAACP will pay proper respects to Brother Charles Evers. He also was the Man of the Year, the same year that he was elected mayor of Fayette, Mississippi back in 1969. I believe it was June the 3rd, 1969. He also was named the NAACP Man of the Year. So why winning your Man of the Year, former Man of the Year, get proper recognition from the organization that he helped progress their agenda in his home state, the Magnolia State? I mean, he took up the cause of his fallen brother. You got to understand, once again, let me repeat, that Medgar Evers wrote to the NAACP for protection for himself and his family. And they did not come through, and it cost him his life. So, I mean, you look at the Evers family has been asked to go above and beyond the call of duty, really. I mean, you think about what lost in Medgar, and then his brother stepped in, and, the leadership at first, like Roy Wilkins, was not warm to the idea of having him as the field secretary. I guess because of his background, but Charles Evans never shied away from his background. His brother was a saint, and he was a sinner, but like the old saying goes, every saint has a past and every sinner has a future. And Charles Evans embodies that. People might say, well, he was like Paul when he was Saul, and he got that epiphany on the road to Damascus. And maybe, maybe not, because Charles Evans, like I said, he had a different personality. Him and his brothers like night and day, but they both were World War II veterans, proud World War II veterans, both college graduates. and also both committed to the cause of liberation of black folks by any means necessary. Like I said, revise what you think about Medgar Evers. Like, he carried guns on his person. He knew how to use a gun. My understanding, he had guns in his car when he was assassinated in front of his family. But he believed in protection. He believed that if things didn't work out, arm uprising like the Mau Mau. Study the Mau Mau. Malcolm X, one of his collaborators towards the end of his life, was a key Mau Mau leader and supporter named Pinto. He was a Indian Kenyan. He's a Kenyan Indian, whatever you want to call it. But he believed in Pan Africanism. He was the one that encouraged Brother Malcolm to try to bring up charges of human rights violations against the United States before the United Nations, and they both was cut down within days of each other in front of their families. So look up Pinto, 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 Pinto. But yes, Brother Charles Evers was a great man, in my opinion, and I was blessed to make his acquaintance and also to get his thoughts for posterity. Check out We All Be TV, and yeah, I mean, we got to do a better job of understanding our true liberators. And like Reverend C.T. Vivian, like I said earlier, these guys had interest in life. We lost a lot of movement people over the last several years that have not been given the proper uh, cover by the new black media. People like Dorothy Cotton, who was a trusted confidant of Dr. King at the SCLC. She passed. I mean, these folks passed within the last 2 or 3 years. Dr. Wyatt T. Walker, another one of Dr. King's lieutenant, really one of the key strategists behind Project C Birmingham. You saw kids going to jail at Birmingham and getting water hoses and dogs, put on them. He was part of that strategy team, Dr. Wyatt T. Walker. And there's so many others that's been under the radar who have passed. And like I said, I want to encourage people just really to interview the elders in your community, in your family, in your village. Get their stories for posterity, study their stories, learn from their mistakes, learn from their failures, learn from their victories. Very important. Like, I know I talked to Dr. T.T. Vivian. I said, what was the biggest regrets of the movement? Looking back, he said, well, one of the biggest regrets we had was that we did not learn our history, that we did not, preserve our history and pass it on to future generations. Now you have things like the great documentary series Eyes on the Prize, created by my fellow alum Henry Hampton. You should check out Eyes on the Prize. Very powerful documentary on the movement. And from my understanding, Henry Hampton, who one time had the largest black-owned film production company in the world at one time, he was literally getting like civil rights footage out of the garbage cans of news stations. Like, his team was going around the country just retrieving invaluable footage that we take for granted today of people getting bitten by dogs and water hoses and all types of stuff from the 60s. They literally had this stuff in garbage cans in news stations around the country and other places. And, they would actually record over these film footage that we found invaluable today. So he did that. Him and his team salvaged our history from the garbage bins of history. And then what is ironic, that a lot of stuff they end up saving, now people have to pay a license fee just to access and use in projects. So the history they found invaluable, and now black folks saved and salvaged this history and made award-winning art, documentaries and film out of it. Now the white folks say you gotta pay the price for admission for your own history. It's like you look at the state of Mississippi, when Charles Evers made his home state. They got all these blues trails and civil rights trails, these blues museums and blues festivals and civil rights museums, but yet you have not paid reparations to the families you terrorized. The black folks' blood, sweat, and tears that made that state what it was and what it is, the terrorism that you put in fear, generational trauma of black people. I mean, like I said, Mississippi should have been had several black governors and U.S. senators since Reconstruction. There's really no excuse but state-sponsored white terrorism, endorsed and sponsored by Joe Biden's mentors. Once again, James Eastland and John Stennis, very powerful U.S. senators, Dixiecrats, Democrats from Mississippi. And Charles Evers, like I said, he endured all that. The state took his brother. That was a state-sponsored assassination of Charles' brother, Medgar. State sponsors, Mississippi Sovereignty Commission, spying on citizens using black folks, Judas's turncoats, to neutralize people like Brother Medgar Evers and others who sought to liberate black people. Check out the documentary Spies of Mississippi by Sister Dawn Porter, I believe her name. I actually interviewed her almost 5 years ago. What was that, 5 or 6 years ago? I interviewed her. We All Be TV archives. She just recently did the Good Trouble John Lewis documentary, How Timely. But we talk about how the Mississippi Sovereignty Commission was using black citizens to spy on at civil rights meetings, take down people's license plate numbers. Like y'all talking about the NFAC, how y'all so disappointed, some of y'all just hypercritical. You need that type of stuff as well. You need folks working behind the scenes, and you need folks in front of the camera. Movements work on different levels. It's levels to everything that we do. So we gotta really start thinking strategy and stop trying to broadcast all our thoughts on social media. That's my take on it. It's people that I respect. They want to tell everything on social media, and really, everything should be broadcast. You know what I'm saying? You know, like what they say, bad boys move in silence and violence. You know, that's the nature of the beast. So let's just be aware and take this time of a so-called quarantine and pandemic to really study us. I would encourage black parents, instead of you despairing about your kids staying home and you gotta, have your hands full, help your kids understand who they are. You take the time to understand who you are so you can impart that to your children. That's not up to the schools to impart knowledge of self to your kids. The schools are there to teach your kids how to be indoctrinated, how to navigate the system, reading, writing, and arithmetic, the basics. You got to teach that pride and knowledge of self in your children. That is your obligation as parents. Even if you didn't have the chance to learn this information, you look at Brother Ron. I get letters and stuff all the time. People tell me, Brother Ron, I use your videos as a starting point to build a curriculum to teach my kids about our history. And then other folks say, Brother Ron, I use your videos to help me understand my history better. And I may not always agree with everything you say. You might say, well, we're not black people, all this stuff. That's not my lane, man. All you indigenous people, I love y'all, but y'all need to understand that, y'all need to build a platform too to impart that understanding. I'm not against the indigenous folks. They want black folks was already here. Yes, we did come before Columbus, but it's other things that I want to understand as well. And it's interesting to me because I think to myself, would I have picked another route if I know what I know now? If I was able to go back 20 years and talk to my 20-year-old self, would I encourage my 20-year-old self to go along this path? And I think about myself, like, who would have, recorded Dick Gregory and other people? I'm sure that, the Most High would have chosen. Many I called, but few I chosen. I just so happened to answer the call. But I just wonder, like, who would have took the time to record some of these people that's now ancestors? And like I said, this work ain't for the meek. Sometimes it can be a very lonely existence. Sometimes you don't get all the love and affection. It is what it is. But what Baba Dick told me in private, like he said, Ron, the soldiers for the universe soul God, for the universe soul God. And if you can't deal with the assignment, get the hell out the army. As simple as that. I'm committed. I'm a soldier through and through, and we'll see. And I really do believe, even in times like these, the best is yet to come.
So it's sad that folks in this day and age will give praises to folks that don't do as much for us as they should. Now, I'm not judging them, I'm not saying no names, but it's like a lot of times when certain people pass, all these praises are heaped upon that person. And like what Janet Jackson sang so many years ago, what have you done for me lately? Whereas you have people that have been consistent in their giving and doing things and not necessarily interested in getting credit for it. And when they're passed, people hardly acknowledge their passing, or don't even understand or understand their contributions. So I hope that by me doing what I'm doing here, this is my humble way of whoever followed me and this platform to get more interest in learning about this man and about yourself. Because don't let the white imagination don't let white imagination limit who you are as well as your potential. Don't get stuck in the box of where, they said that all you could be is this. You shouldn't always worry about trying to struggle to get people validation. Like Baba Dick would tell me all the time, my truth does not need to be validated by your ignorance. I don't need to prove anything to you. I really just need to prove it to myself and be kind and patient and willing to go the extra mile for myself. That's what Charles Evans was about. He was never ashamed of who he was. He owned his past. He claimed his children. He did his thing his way. And that's why I respect him. And I'm glad that I had the chance to meet him, to thank him, to honor him, to break bread in terms of mental food for thought. You know what I'm saying? That type of stuff. It's very important. I'm glad I'm able to share this with you all. And I hope I did him some justice in this presentation. So much to cover, so little time. But I just want to do this before I cut my mama grass. But if you like the words from Brother Herd, please spread the word. Subscribe to We All Be TV. You find the We All Be TV, all one word, on YouTube. Support the artivist movement. Knowledge is the currency of the universe, and we love giving y'all the information to disseminate among your people, among your networks. You can support us at patreon.com/weallbe. Also, you could cash out your support $R2C2H2. That's $R2C2H2. Google Pay or PayPal, R2C2H2 @gmail.com. Once again, that's Google Pay or PayPal, R2C2H2 @gmail.com. You can buy artivist gear at our Teespring R2C2H2 place. That's R2C2H2's place. It's my shirt. You know, it's the 3 M's, right? The brothers M. Baba Dick and the brothers M, right? Got Malcolm, Medgar, and Martin. And that's Dick as a young man in his 30s. That's Dick when he was in his 80s. And I want to say that's interesting. The Dick Gregory, a lot of his best friends died before they made it to 40. You know, Medgar died at 37. Charles lived to be 97. That's 60 plus years of living he did. And he didn't waste no years. He made his mark. And it's up to us to acknowledge those marks and really to raise the standards from where he raised them, to raise them even further. Because he was always about his people. He loved his people. And I just want people to understand that it's complex with human beings, that we all contradictory. But also you should give credit where credit is due. Where criticism is due, you should provide criticism. Because to paraphrase the words of Malcolm X, without criticism, you won't have success. Without criticism, you won't have success. So thank y'all for listening to me. I think that's all. Man, I talked like an hour and some change. I think that's enough. I think I gave y'all some decent stuff on Charles Evans. So thank you all. In the words of Great Duke Ellington, we love you madly. Keep on producing and pushing. One love.
Hey everybody, this is Brother Ron. I am asking you all to do me a big favor. Think about supporting the We All Be movement. Your donation is tax deductible. The We All Be Group Incorporated is a recognized 501c3. And I'm just asking you all because I want to keep on bringing y'all quality work through the way that I know how to do best. And I'm going to sing my praises and toot my horn. A lot of y'all were not hip to Dick Gregory until Brother Ron brought him on the We All Be platform, until that Django review we did. Y'all seen another side of Judge Joe Brown, and Judge Joe Brown's message has been amplified. But it was We All Be that brought Judge Joe Brown to y'all back in 2014. And so many others. And we covered so many things. So help us out so we can help you all. Peace.